Have you ever felt so lost that you didn't even know what to ask anymore? It's not exactly sadness. It's not anger. It's this kind of emptiness, a feeling like you're floating in the middle of nothing. Like everything keeps spinning, but somehow you've stopped. Sometimes it happens in traffic, on your way to work, when out of nowhere, you feel tears pushing through, and you don't even know why. Other times, it's when you lie down at night. Your body is tired, but your soul just won't rest. And you ask yourself, is this it? Is this what life's about? Will it always feel this heavy? And in the middle of that silent darkness, a question begins to whisper. When should I seek God? Many people think they have to wait until they're all better, when they're worthy, when their life is in order. But what if it's the other way around? What if the perfect time to seek God is when you feel the most broken? Let me tell you something that happened, or rather, something a close friend of mine went through. His name is Daniel. Daniel was always the one who had it all together. He worked hard, helped his family, smiled at everyone. But inside, he was slowly fading. He felt like, even though everyone admired him, no one really knew him. One day, right on the edge of a panic attack, he locked himself in his car and just cried. No words, no plan, just tears. And in that moment, he whispered for the first time, God, if you're really there, help me. There were no thunders, no voice from heaven, just a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt like someone real, was simply there with him, not judging, just staying. In the days that followed, Daniel didn't suddenly become perfect. But something changed. He started talking to God in his thoughts. He began to read lines that felt like they were written just for him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt peace. And it all started when he dared to seek God from the middle of his mess. And maybe, just maybe, you and I can do the same. There are days when you just can't anymore. And it's not because of some huge disaster. There wasn't a car crash or a major loss. It's just a soul-deep exhaustion that you can't quite explain. Take Maria, for example. A mother of two, working long shifts, always coming home with a smile. But when she was alone, she felt like life was slipping through her fingers. Nothing was really wrong, but nothing felt right either. Everything had turned gray. Just an endless routine, tasteless and hollow. One night, she sat on the bathroom floor for almost an hour. She couldn't move. She just kept thinking, is this really all there is for me? And maybe that same question has brushed up against your heart too. When everything looks fine on the outside, but inside you're on the verge of collapse, it's hard to know what to do. You feel guilty for not being more grateful, for not being stronger, for not fixing it. But right there, in that invisible place, where no one sees that you're breaking, that's often where God starts speaking. And not how we imagine. Not with thunder. Not with spectacular miracles. Sometimes, His voice shows up like a quiet thought you didn't know you needed. Or a phrase in a random video that feels like it was made just for you. Jesus once said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. He didn't say, "Come when you've got it together." He said, "Come just as you are." Maybe you think you don't have time for God, or that you need to fix a bunch of things first. But what if the weight you're carrying is what's keeping you from moving forward? Because you're carrying it alone. Seeking God isn't about adding more weight to your life. It's about letting go. Surrendering without losing. It's saying, I can't anymore, but maybe I don't have to do this alone. Because when everything feels like it's falling apart, maybe what's really happening is your soul crying out to come home. And God, He never gets tired of waiting for you. Sometimes, when everything around us is loud, all we long for is a voice that brings peace. Not answers, not solutions, just peace. Andrea was going through one of the hardest seasons of her life. Her relationship had ended, she had lost her job, and she had no idea how she'd pay her rent. Everyone around her kept saying the same things. Stay strong, God has a purpose. Everything happens for a reason. But those words, although well-meaning, felt empty. They didn't bring comfort. They didn't reach her. One night, unable to sleep, she grabbed her phone and looked for anything to distract herself. Without meaning to, she opened a short video where someone said, "God is not done with you. He sees your tears." It was like being hugged without being touched. She cried, not out of despair, but relief. Because finally, someone, or rather, God, had seen her. Sometimes, God's voice doesn't sound like thunder. Sometimes, it's a whisper in the middle of the storm. In the Bible, the prophet Elijah expected to hear God in the strong wind, in the earthquake, in the fire. But God wasn't in any of those. Then came a gentle, quiet whisper, and that's where God was. That tells us something. God doesn't always shout. Sometimes, His most powerful words are whispered. Maybe that's why it's so important to pause, to turn off the noise, to silence the outside voices, and the inner ones too, the ones that say you're not enough, that there's no more hope. What if that thought that showed up in your heart wasn't just a thought? What if that Bible verse you stumbled on wasn't random? What if that song that made you cry was God speaking directly to you? God speaks in many ways, but more than anything, He speaks to the heart. Not through logic, but through tenderness. And when He speaks, His voice heals, restores, reconnects. I remember one time, in my own mess, when I felt like I couldn't even pray. I just lay on the floor and said, "God, I have nothing to say today. I'm just here." And it was enough. Because God doesn't need fancy words. He just needs sincerity. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength." That verse changed me. It helped me realize that sometimes the greatest act of faith is to be still and listen. Maybe today God isn't giving you a clear plan, but He's saying something deeper. I am with you. Even if you don't feel it, I haven't left. And that changes everything. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right time. When I'm less busy. When I finally fix myself. When I stop messing up. When I feel ready. But what if that perfect moment never comes? Because the real moment, the one that matters, is already here. Maybe the right time isn't about your circumstances. Maybe it's about your heart being just broken enough, just tired enough, to be open. You don't need to have everything figured out to come close to God. You don't need flawless faith. Just a heart that dares to say, "God, I'm here." One of the biggest lies we believe is that we have to earn God's love. That He'll come when we've cleaned ourselves up. That He's waiting for us to be better. But that's not love. And that's not God. God doesn't fall in love with a future version of you. He loves you, today, in your mess, in your doubt, in your silence. Maybe what keeps us away from Him isn't our sins or our mistakes. Maybe it's our shame. That feeling that we're too far gone. Too complicated. Too broken. But let me tell you something powerful. God isn't afraid of your mess. He doesn't flinch at your pain. He walks into it with tenderness. Jesus once told a story about a young man who messed up everything. He took his inheritance, walked away from home, and hit rock bottom. When he decided to come back, dirty, scared, and ashamed, the father didn't wait at the door with a lecture. He ran toward him. He hugged him. He celebrated his return. That's how God receives us. Not with a list of conditions, but with open arms. Maybe this exact moment, this video, this sentence, this ache in your heart, is your sign. Not from me, but from Him. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 6 verse 2, "Now is the time of God's favor, now is the day of salvation." Not tomorrow. Not once you're ready. Maybe you've been carrying so much for so long, you forgot what it's like to rest. Maybe all you need right now is to let go. To say something simple like, "God, I don't know how to do this, but if you're there, please stay with me." That's not weakness. That's the bravest prayer there is. Seeking God doesn't mean joining a religion. It doesn't mean pretending you believe something you're not sure about. It simply means turning your heart, even just a little, in His direction. You don't need to make promises. You don't need to perform. Just come, with your doubts, with your tiredness, with your questions, and just say, "Here I am." He knows what to do with that. He always has. So if you've been wondering, when should I seek God? Maybe the real question is, why not now? Now, when your heart is honest. Now, when you need peace more than perfection. Now, when He's closer than you think. Maybe this video didn't give you all the answers, but maybe it gave you something even more important. The quiet certainty that you are not alone. Seeking God isn't about perfection. It's not a polished prayer or a grand spiritual awakening. Sometimes, it's as simple as a whisper in your heart. "God, I need you." That whisper matters. That whisper is heard. If there's a longing in your heart, even a small one, don't ignore it. Don't bury it beneath distractions, fear, or shame. Because that longing could be God gently calling you home. God isn't waiting for the best version of you. He's not measuring your worth by your success or your past. He's not counting your failures. He's looking at your heart. Right now. Exactly as it is. There's a verse in Jeremiah 29 verse 11 that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope." That hope isn't for perfect people. It's for the broken. The ones who cry when no one sees. The ones who keep going even when it hurts. The ones who feel like maybe, just maybe, they've run out of chances. But you haven't. Not with God. Never with Him. If your heart is tired, if your soul feels lost, just speak to Him. Even if it's messy. Even if you're unsure. He hears the things you don't know how to say. He understands the tears you don't speak. And if you don't know where to begin, begin here. "God, I don't know much, but I want to know you. If you're real, speak to me." That's all it takes. Because God is not far. He's near. Closer than your breath. And He's not waiting to judge you. He's waiting to hold you. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you want to keep receiving more content like this, filled with honesty, hope, and grace, feel free to subscribe and turn on the notifications. But more than anything, talk to God today. Because He's been waiting. And He's still there. Just for you.